On the evening of April 1st, 2026, a college student in Wuhan climbed into a taxi. There was no driver, no one behind the steering wheel, no one in the passenger seat next to her. She sat in the back with two friends, tapped a button on a screen, and the car pulled into traffic on its own. The steering wheel turned by itself. The car changed lanes by itself. It stopped at red lights and accelerated through green ones without any human touching anything. This was not unusual. In Wuhan alone, hundreds of these taxis were driving people around every single night. 300,000 rides like this were happening every week across China. For this student, it was just another Tuesday night. Then the car stopped. Not at a traffic light, not at her destination. The car just stopped, in the middle of an elevated ring road, with traffic moving at high speed on both sides. A message appeared on the screen. Driving system malfunction. Staff are expected to arrive in 5 minutes. 5 minutes passed. Nobody came. She pressed the SOS button. It took her 30 minutes to reach a customer service representative on the phone. She was stuck inside that car for 90 minutes. She was not alone. Across the entire city of Wuhan, more than 100 driverless taxis had stopped at the same time. On highways, on ring roads, in the middle of intersections. Passengers sat inside cars that would not move, surrounded by traffic that could not get past. At least one collision happened on a highway when a car behind a stopped taxi could not brake in time. Videos spread across Douyin and Waymo within minutes, showing rows of white robotaxis sitting motionless in traffic lanes while confused drivers swerved around them. It was the first mass shutdown of autonomous taxis ever recorded in China. Bloomberg covered it, CNN covered it, The Washington Post covered it. For a moment, it looked like the whole experiment might be over. It was not over, not even close. And what happened in the months after that night is what makes this story worth telling from the beginning. Because the company that built those taxis did not slow down after the incident. It accelerated. And 4 months later, Uber, the company that invented modern ride-hailing, signed a deal to put those same Chinese driverless taxis on its own platform. If you enjoy videos about technology that is reshaping how the world moves in ways most people have not noticed yet, hit like and subscribe so you never miss one. To understand how driverless taxis went from a science fiction concept to 300,000 rides a week in China, you need to know about one person. His name is Robin Li. He is the co-founder and CEO of Baidu, which most people outside China know as the Chinese version of Google. Baidu runs the dominant search engine in China. It has hundreds of millions of users. It makes billions of dollars a year from advertising and cloud services. But Robin Li decided over a decade ago that search was not the future. Artificial intelligence was the future. And the most important application of artificial intelligence was not chatbots or image generators. It was making cars drive themselves. In 2013, Li created an autonomous driving research division inside Baidu. At the time, Google was the only major tech company seriously investing in self-driving cars, through a project that would later become Waymo. Most people in the technology industry considered autonomous driving a distant dream, something that might work in 20 or 30 years, maybe longer. Li did not agree. He committed billions of yuan to the project. He hired hundreds of engineers. He recruited Andrew Ng, one of the most respected artificial intelligence researchers in the world, to lead Baidu's AI lab. He named the autonomous driving program Apollo, after the NASA space program, because he believed self-driving cars would be as transformative as landing on the moon. For years, the investment produced nothing visible to the public. Baidu tested vehicles on closed tracks in Beijing, then on limited public roads in small designated zones, then in slightly larger areas within a few cities. The progress was incremental, and the costs were enormous. Each test vehicle cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. The sensor suites alone, the LiDAR units, the cameras, the radar modules, were more expensive than luxury cars. Shareholders questioned whether the money was being wasted on a fantasy. Competitors like Alibaba and Tencent focused on more immediately profitable applications of AI, like e-commerce recommendations and payment systems. The Chinese tech press wrote articles asking whether Robin Li was wasting Baidu's future on a technology that might never work. But Li had studied the history of transformative technologies closely enough to know that the gap between impossible and inevitable is often shorter than anyone expects. He kept funding Apollo year after year, even when the returns were zero and the criticism was loud. He told his board that autonomous driving was not a side project. It was the future of Baidu. The company would either lead in AI-driven transportation or it would become irrelevant. There was no middle ground. Then, in April 2022, something happened that most people outside China missed entirely. Beijing issued the first permits in the country for fully driverless commercial ride-hailing. No safety driver, no one in the front seat, just passengers in the back and a computer in control. Baidu was one of the first companies to receive those permits. The service launched under the name Apollo Go, and for the first time, regular people could open an app, request a ride, and be picked up by a car with nobody in it. What followed was a scale-up that moved faster than anything the Western autonomous driving industry had ever attempted. But before I tell you how fast it grew, you need to understand the machine that made it possible, because the vehicle itself is what separates Baidu from every other company trying to do this. Most autonomous vehicle companies in the United States take an existing car, a Jaguar, a Chrysler, a Hyundai, and bolt self-driving hardware onto it. Cameras, LiDAR sensors, radar units, computing boxes, all mounted on a vehicle that was originally designed for a human driver. The steering wheel stays, the pedals stay, the dashboard stays. The car is a human car with a computer strapped to the roof. Baidu took a different approach. In 2022, the company unveiled the RT6. It is the world's first mass-produced Level 4 autonomous vehicle that was designed from the beginning to operate without a driver. There is no steering wheel in most configurations, no pedals, no driver's seat. The entire front of the car is redesigned to maximize passenger space and sensor placement. The computing system is integrated into the vehicle architecture, not added on top of it, and the production cost is under $30,000 per unit. That number matters. Waymo's self-driving Jaguar I-Pace costs well over $100,000 per vehicle. The RT6 costs less than a Toyota Camry. At that price, deploying thousands of vehicles becomes financially possible in a way that it is not for any Western competitor. By the end of 2025, Apollo Go was operating in over 20 cities across China: Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, Wuhan, Chongqing, and more than a dozen smaller cities where autonomous vehicles were quietly becoming part of the transportation landscape. In the fourth quarter of 2025 alone, the service delivered 3.4 million fully driverless rides. Total rides grew by over 200% year-on-year. Cumulative rides passed 20 million by February 2026. The fleet had driven more than 300 million autonomous kilometers, with over 190 million of those in fully driverless mode. Remember that number, 300 million kilometers. That is not test track driving. That is real roads with real traffic, real pedestrians, real weather, real chaos. No other company on Earth has accumulated that much autonomous driving data in real-world conditions. And then came April 1st, the night everything stopped in Wuhan. 100 robotaxis freezing simultaneously on city streets is exactly the kind of event that kills a technology program. The videos were dramatic. Passengers filmed from inside cars that would not move, their faces lit by the glow of error messages on the screen in front of them. Outside, traffic swerved around the motionless white taxis like water flowing around rocks in a river. One widely shared video on Douyin showed a robotaxi stopped dead in the middle lane of a ring road, an elevated highway with no traffic lights and no easy way to pull over, with cars passing at 70 or 80 kilometers per hour on both sides. The passengers inside could open the doors, but stepping out into that traffic was terrifying. Some chose to stay and wait. One woman later told a reporter she sat in the car for nearly 2 hours before someone came. The headlines were alarming. Bloomberg ran the story. CNN ran it. The Washington Post ran it. Social media in China exploded with comments questioning whether the robotaxi experiment had gone too far, too fast. China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology immediately ordered local authorities to conduct safety inspections and tighten supervision of autonomous vehicle testing across the country. Baidu's stock price dropped. In the United States, an incident like this would likely have triggered congressional hearings, class action lawsuits, regulatory investigations, and a long operational pause. Waymo's much smaller fleet in San Francisco has faced intense scrutiny for far less serious incidents, including cases where its cars simply drove slowly or blocked traffic without any malfunction at all. The American regulatory environment treats every autonomous vehicle incident as evidence that the technology is not ready. But in China, the response from both the government and the company followed a different logic. Baidu acknowledged the malfunction, cooperated fully with investigators, and submitted a detailed incident report. Within weeks, the fleet was back to full capacity. No lawsuits were filed, no congressional hearings were held. The government's message was clear: fix the problem, learn from the failure, do not stop the program. The assumption in China is that new technology will fail sometimes, and that failure is part of the development process, not a reason to abandon it. This is where the story takes a turn that most people did not see coming. 3 months before the Wuhan incident, in July 2025, Uber announced a multi-year global partnership with Baidu to deploy thousands of Apollo Go vehicles on the Uber platform in markets outside the United States and mainland China. Read that again. Uber, the American company that revolutionized personal transportation, the company that disrupted the taxi industry in every major city on the planet, signed a deal to put Chinese driverless cars on its own app. In February 2026, 1 month before the Wuhan incident, Apollo Go launched on the Uber app in Dubai. Passengers in the Jumeirah district could open their Uber app, select the autonomous option, and be picked up by a Baidu Robotaxi. No driver, no steering wheel. On the streets of Dubai, one of the most modern and fast-moving cities in the Middle East. Through the Uber app, the same app that millions of people around the world open every day to get a ride to work or to the airport. In December 2025, Baidu also partnered with Uber and Lyft to bring driverless taxis to London. The plan is to deploy Baidu's RT6 vehicles on London streets, the same narrow, winding, complex, unpredictable roads that generations of human taxi drivers have spent 3 to 4 years learning to navigate through a grueling process called the knowledge. London cabbies memorize 25,000 streets and thousands of points of interest before they are allowed to carry a single paying passenger. It is considered one of the most difficult vocational qualifications in the world. A Baidu RT6 does not need the knowledge. It has 300 million kilometers of driving data and a neural network that processes information from dozens of sensors simultaneously. Waymo, the Google subsidiary that has been working on the same technology from the American side, also announced plans for London in 2026. For the first time, 2 competing autonomous vehicle companies, one American and one Chinese, will be deploying driverless taxis in the same European city at the same time. The race that started in Silicon Valley and Shenzhen is now arriving on the streets of cities that neither company calls home. The Wuhan incident happened after all of these deals were already signed. Uber did not pull out. Lyft did not pull out. The Dubai deployment continued. The London plans stayed on track. The companies looked at the data, looked at the 300 million kilometers of driving experience, looked at the 20 million rides completed, and concluded that one system failure, however dramatic and however viral the videos became, did not change the overall safety record. The calculation was cold but straightforward. Human drivers in China are involved in roughly 600,000 traffic accidents per year. Baidu's fleet, across 20 million rides and 300 million kilometers, has a safety record that no human fleet of comparable size has ever matched. The comparison with Waymo is worth making in detail because it shows how far ahead China is in deployment scale, even though the technology was invented in the United States. Waymo has been working on self-driving cars since 2009. It has arguably the best autonomous driving technology in the Western world. Its vehicles are cautious, precise, and well-tested. They operate in San Francisco, Phoenix, Los Angeles, Austin, and a small number of other American cities. Waymo completes roughly 250,000 autonomous rides per week. That is impressive by any measure. Baidu completes over 300,000 rides per week in 26 cities, with a vehicle that costs less than a third of Waymo's Jaguar I-Pace. And unlike Waymo, which operates exclusively within its own closed platform, Baidu is licensing its technology to Uber and Lyft, which means Chinese driverless vehicles will be accessible to hundreds of millions of existing ride-hailing users around the world without those users having to download a new app or create a new account. They just open Uber, the app they already have, and a Chinese car with no driver shows up. The American company invented autonomous driving. The Chinese company figured out how to mass produce it, price it for global deployment, and sell it to the platforms that already control the market. Now multiply this forward. Baidu has announced plans to reach 100 cities by 2030. The company says it will have the capacity to produce 800,000 autonomous vehicles per year by 2028. If even a fraction of that target is met, the number of driverless rides happening globally will go from millions to hundreds of millions per year. And a significant share of those rides will be in cars built in China, running Chinese software, collecting data that flows back to Chinese servers. The effects are already visible in the cities where robotaxis operate at scale. In Wuhan, which has one of the largest Apollo Go deployments in the country, human ride-hailing drivers have reported significant declines in income. Some drivers told Chinese media that their daily earnings dropped by 30 to 40% after robotaxis expanded into their operating zones. The robotaxis do not surge price during rush hour. They do not refuse short trips. They do not take breaks during the lunch rush. They are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they charge less than human drivers because they have no salary to recover. In October 2024, thousands of ride-hailing drivers in Wuhan signed a joint letter to the municipal government asking for limits on the number of robotaxis allowed to operate in the city. The letter described falling wages, longer hours, and the growing difficulty of competing with a machine that works for free. The city did not impose limits. The deployment continued to expand. The drivers were told, implicitly, that the future had already been decided. This is not just a Chinese phenomenon. Every city where autonomous ride-hailing launches will face the same dynamic. The technology is cheaper, more consistent, and always available. Human drivers cannot compete on price or availability. They can only compete on trust, on the feeling that another human being is in control of the vehicle. And as the data shows, that trust gap is closing fast. Passengers who ride in a robotaxi for the first time are initially nervous. Passengers who ride in one for the 10th time stop thinking about it. By the 50th ride, the idea of a human driver feels like an unnecessary cost. There are roughly 4 million people working as taxi drivers, rideshare drivers, and delivery drivers in the United States alone. Globally, the number is tens of millions. In China, ride-hailing platforms employ or contract with millions of drivers who depend on that income to feed their families. In India, ride-hailing is one of the largest sources of employment for young men without college degrees. In Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, in Latin America, driving for platforms like Uber, Grab, and Careem is not a side hustle. It is a career. For many people, it is the only career available. These are not abstract statistics. These are people with families, mortgages, and car payments who drive for a living. The technology to replace most of them already exists. It is driving around Wuhan right now. It is on the Uber app in Dubai. It is being tested on the streets of London, the same city where black cab drivers spend 3 to 4 years memorizing every street before they are allowed to carry a passenger. A computer that has driven 300 million kilometers does not need to memorize anything. It already knows. The timeline is not a generation from now. It is this decade. Baidu plans 100 cities by 2030, 800,000 vehicles per year by 2028. Uber and Lyft are already integrating the technology into their platforms. Every major automaker is watching. Every ride-hailing company is doing the math. The math always comes out the same way. Nobody asked those drivers whether they wanted this future. Nobody asked the passengers who were trapped on a Wuhan highway for 90 minutes whether the convenience of cheaper rides was worth the risk. Nobody asked the cities that are about to see their taxi industries disappear whether they were ready for what comes next. The technology moved faster than the conversation, the way it always does. Robin Li spent 12 years and billions of dollars betting that this moment would come. On April 1st, 2026, 100 of his taxis stopped working, and the whole world watched. 4 months later, Uber put those same taxis on its platform, and the whole world shrugged. That is how fast the line between breakthrough and normal moves now. If this video changed how you think about the next time you get in a car and there is nobody in the front seat, hit like and subscribe for more. Turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And I want to hear from you. If a driverless taxi costs a fraction of a human driver and has 300 million kilometers of experience, but 100 of them can freeze on a highway in the middle of the night, would you get in one? Drop your answer in the comments.